everybody. Welcome to the Friday Hangout. This is the show where we talk with digital marketers about all kinds of fabulous things and share them with people that we really like. And one of them this week is Jason Falls. We're really happy to have Jason on the show this week because we got a lot of things to talk about. Content, branding, thought leadership. He's going to tell us all about it. But before you do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Oh, about me? Holy moly.
Yeah.
I was born at an early age, and so I am Vice President for Digital Strategy at Cafe Press. I've been there for about 18 months. Prior to that, I founded and was for a time the CEO. I'm no longer the CEO. And am chief instigator, I guess you could say, at Social Media Explorer, which started out as a blog and became a digital marketing agency. Nicole Kelly is now the CEO and operates that business as I've moved on over to Cafe Press. I've been in the digital marketing social media space, consulting clients and brands and whatnot for about 8 years now. Prior to that, I come from the PR world and the sports world, which means I didn't make any money. But I live in Louisville, Kentucky, married, 2 kids, love bourbon, love sports. There you go.
Anybody who loves bourbon is a friend of mine. And all that other stuff.
Exactly.
Well, I need to let everybody know that Steve is participating virtually for the moment. He's having some technical issues. But he has the first question of the show.
Oh, no.
He wants to know, what technical skills do you recommend markets have a firm understanding of to compete in the content marketing technologists?
I think to be competent, I think, is what he's working with.
I think competent was probably the word.
To have a firm understanding, to be competent content marketing technologists. What technical skills? You know, somebody asked me a similar question the other day. It was more devoted to public relations, but I think it has a lot of applications here, because your content marketing skill set is going to come from the advertising, marketing, sort of right brain creative world to a degree. It's a generalization, certainly, but to a degree it's where it's going to come from. And, you know, sort of the internet, digital marketing, SEO, et cetera, that's going to come from your left brain folks, you know, your analytical, technical folks. And so I think if you were to say to the right brain creative folks out there, what technical skills do you need? I think it's really, there's two things you need. One's tactical and one is strategic. Tactically, you need to understand how to edit video. You need to understand how to edit audio if you're doing podcasting. You need to understand, you need to be a multimedia communicator and understand all the different mechanisms. You have to get good written skills. You have to be able to be concise and good editing skills. But certainly, you know, multimedia, video, interactive presentations, et cetera, even still images. You need to understand how to communicate in those channels. From a strategic standpoint, though, it's really more about understanding each of the individual channels you're using to communicate in and understanding those audiences. Because, for instance, it's very, very different to design a successful piece of communications for Pinterest than it is to design a successful piece of communications for, let's say, Facebook or Twitter. There's subtle differences. Sometimes they can be similar, but when you're a primarily visual platform, you're communicating differently than a primary text platform or similar. So the technical skill is just, if you went to school to be a PR person in like the 80s and 90s when I grew up, you learned how to be a PR person, and there was somebody to do your audio editing and somebody to do your video editing and shooting and someone to do all these other things. Now you've got to be all of it compact in one person.
Now you're the guy.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so true, and also to understand how those things work together. You know, I think from my perspective, you know, okay, sometimes we'll have strategists that will come up with all these wonderful ideas, and they think they're all really easy, and that they're going to be able to do it for basically no budget at all. You know,
yeah,
for $1.50, we get an infographic, and that's going to work across all our platforms, and it'll go viral.
Yeah, and one of the hangups that I find, you mentioned infographics. I find that that's a really good example because like I feel like I'm a pretty good communicator in multiple channels, but I'm not a designer, and I don't have the designer brain, and I certainly don't have the creative skills to just go into Illustrator or Photoshop and create something beautiful from nothing. Now I can get into Photoshop and hack something to death and make it look okay, but I just don't have design skills, right? So there is that sort of contradiction that you need to have all these skills packaged into one person, but there are certain skill sets that are a part of that. Like there are some people who cannot edit video to save their lives because they just don't get it, and that's fine. I'm fortunate in that I've been able to figure out how to do that over the years. I think some of those skills are learnable. But I think some of them, like creative design, being able to come up with something fresh and new without having something to go from, especially from a digital standpoint in Photoshop or Illustrator. I don't have that capability, so I typically have to lean on some design expert for those types of visual things.
Well, and certainly, I mean, we're a digital marketing agency, so I like to hear that. But, for me, a lot of it is being able to manage how you converse with people. There's the left brains and the right brains, and you have to be able to merge what the two of them are thinking and help them come up with the right thing. I'm like you. I can do things in Photoshop and they'll look kind of okay, but not really great, and certainly not as polished as professional as my team does. So being able to communicate what the client wants and what my concept of what it is to the designer, and then have it come back to the client without them hating it, is a real skill that a lot of
Yeah.
people don't have.
There's another sort of added layer to it when you do have those skills or multiple skills with video and imagery and so on and so forth, and the client wants something cheap and fast and good. The old advertising adage is cheap, fast, good, pick two. You can't have all three. I can do something cheap and I can do something fast, but if you want it good, well, you're going to have to invest some money and some time in it. So if
And
I
some
were to
thought.
design, yeah, it's a thought. If I were to design you a logo in Photoshop or in Illustrator, me personally, Jason Falls, I could do it for very very little money, and I could probably do it relatively quickly. But you're going to be like, what is this, clip art? What the hell, because more than likely I would go out and get clip art and put a shadow behind it, and there you go.
I think I saw that in Microsoft Word.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So uh, when we're talking about, one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was building influence and using content to build influence. So what does that look like when somebody wants to build influence in a particular niche? What kind of content should they be developing, and what kind of strategy should they be looking at?
So I think if you take the advent of the individual blogger, the content expert in XYZ field, emerged, starting in probably 2000, I don't know, 3 or 4, and really blew up in 2007, 2008, and I was, a part of that wave with Social Media Explorer. I started Social Media Explorer in 2007, and my entire purpose of starting Social Media Explorer was to position myself as a thought leader in the public relations, social media, digital marketing area. And so if you take it, whether you're looking at it from an individual perspective or you're looking at it from a company perspective, what you've got to do is you've got to say, I'm going to devote my content marketing energies to developing posts that are either prescriptive for an industry, proactive in saying, here's what I see on the horizon for the industry, reactive to what people in the industry are talking about, and you've got to build it in a consistent fashion so that whenever there is news or some development in the industry that you want to be a thought leader in, that you want to be influential in, people actually will turn to you first. Media members will come to you and say, hey, we want your perspective on this because we know you're the expert. And the way you do that is just consistently providing insightful content and commentary on whatever that topic is over time. There are a lot of people out there who I think approach it as, well, let's do a blog for 6 or 8 months, get a bunch of posts up there on all the broad topics, and then we'll stop and we'll sit there and let the media come to us. That's not how it works. you've got to be on the forefront, dictating the content, leading the discussion on what people are talking about in the industry. And you'll find certain little things that'll pop up from time to time that you'll actually throw an opinion out there before anybody else will, and that's when you get not just the random marketing profs person getting a quote from you, or the GigaOM research getting a quote from you, but you'll get CNN calling, or you'll get MSNBC will want you on a show or something like that. So as you build that over time and build that audience, build that credibility, you become the influencer, you become the thought leader.
That's a really important point, that being first to have some new information is huge. I mean, you can share Mashable all day, and it's already been done. Most of the people that are watching the space probably already know about it or have already read about it. And so coming up with those kind of original thoughts or first takes on new things that break out, that can be huge. How do you do that? How do you locate that new information ahead of everybody else?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's, I guess, commiserating with the right circles, knowing the other influencers, the startup SEO types or CEO types in the industry and whatnot, and being connected. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is just being very thoughtful about how you approach a new topic. Like, for instance, when the allegations or the revelation, if you want to say, came out a few months ago about the Facebook organic reach problem, and Valleywag, I think, had some sort of insider scoop. Someone inside from Facebook said that Facebook's going to be intentionally dialing down organic reach just to drive more advertising sales through its new ad platform opportunities. I kind of jumped out there and said, okay, let's look at this from a very logical perspective. Instead of reacting like everybody's going to want to react, like their hair's on fire and Facebook's screwing everybody, let's take a look at it. A, are they swindling us? B, are they not swindling us? How are they? And how aren't they? Not or, how are they? And so I wrote a post on Social Media Explorer. It's called, I think, The Great Facebook Swindle and What to Do About It. Sexy headline, but essentially what I say is, hey, here are the reasons why I think Facebook is swindling or blackmailing us, and here are the reasons why I don't think they're swindling or blackmailing us, and here's what I think you as a brand can do to overcome this organic reach problem. So it was a solution to the problem as well, offering some ideas there, but it was really kind of unbiased. It was like if someone from Facebook read it, they would go, oh, that was kind of fair, and if someone who hated Facebook read it, would go, oh, that was kind of fair. Right? So everybody had something from that. They could take a nugget from it. And because I was very quick to get that out there, because I had also talked to people at Facebook about it, and being in a position at Cafe Press where you spend a lot of advertising dollars with them, you can get somebody on the phone if you need to. So I was in an advantageous position, certainly. But I got that out there, and that post kind of blew up, and I started getting calls from media members. I think I made a guest spot on the BBC and so on and so forth. So it's really just making sure that you are quick to react to industry news, and you have a thoughtful reaction to it.
That it isn't the same old, and here's what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, if you jump into your blog, into WordPress or whatever you blog on, and you just start, the immediate reaction of a lot of people to that, especially from the brand perspective, was, oh, Facebook is screwing us, and they're swindling us, and this is nothing but a bunch of greed, and Zuckerberg just wants to make more money, and da-da-da-da-da. And that would have been a very popular post, and you would have gotten a lot of traffic. But that's a one-sided, noisy response.
And
it's better if, from a thought leader, you got to step back and say, okay, here's one side of the issue, but let's assume Facebook is not intentionally dialing down. Why would this happen? What are the reasons that those metrics would appear the way they do? And so if you put yourself through that exercise of, to borrow a phrase, being fair and balanced, shocking in this day and age, but if you put yourself through that exercise, you actually come out with more thoughtful reactions to the news of the day, and I think get more respect and response from the community.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think you actually, it's always about adding value instead of just resharing the same old.
Sure.
How do you think then that paid, earned, owned, how does all of that pull together into a strategy around developing thought leadership or developing a brand identity? How do we leverage that?
Sure. So, the paid, earned, and owned concoction is going to be different for everyone, but each of those three tenets is very, very important. Your owned is where you, I think, start these days. You start with a blog. You start with your social channels. You start with the communications platforms where you can push out messages and whatnot. Certainly, you can engage with your audiences on those channels too, but it's really a mechanism for you to proactively say to the world, this is our perspective, this is my thoughts, these are my ideas, this is my reaction, et cetera, et cetera. So you start with the owned. You own that, you push that out there. The earned is going to come from on the owned platforms providing compelling content. What I just described, that good, fair, balanced, thoughtful reaction to something that happens, or an interesting idea that no one's had before that you sort of proactively push out there as your own content. Good, creative, original, compelling content is going to produce earned media. Now, certainly you can take a thought leadership position, post that on your owned media, have your public relations folks take it and promote it so that it gets picked up elsewhere too. So you can just use the good old-fashioned PR engine that we've always had as marketers and companies to produce that earned media as well. Mm-hmm. But if you're not getting the pickup and the reach that you want to get out of those opportunities, that's where paid comes in. And you can say, you know what, we're going to put this as a post on Facebook and we're going to boost that post. We're going to pay to get that in front of a more relevant audience or in front of more of a relevant audience. Or we're going to go out and we're going to buy time at a trade show, or we're going to buy attention or a time at a conference where we can speak about this, or we're going to sponsor a newscast and make sure that we put that in there and hopefully negotiate a bit of an earned, sponsored earned, if you will, interview on that particular news program. So you can use your paid budget to supplement and get more eyeballs on that. If you've got a particular piece that you really want the world to see, then you're going to use that combination of owned, earned, and paid to get maximum eyeballs and exposure on that idea.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, people think that they're just going to be able to throw up a blog and suddenly everybody's going to love them. It's all going to just fall together. So, I think, how do people measure that? Steve has a question. He wants to know what metrics are the most meaningful to a content marketing manager, and how can they make that data actionable? How can they use that data to make smarter strategy decisions?
So, I really think that even though that can be a complex answer, I think the answer to that question is rather simple. It all depends, first of all, on what your goal is. If your goal is to build thought leadership, you're not going to measure that with sales. If your goal is sales, you're not going to measure it with thought leadership or customer service scores or anything else. You're going to measure it with sales. So you have to start with, what's the purpose of the content? You can certainly have multiple purposes, but I think ultimately you have to say, look, this piece of content we're putting out there to build thought leadership for our CEO. When you look at that, how do you build thought leadership? What metrics are going to tell you that you're doing a good job? Quotes in other media. Earned media exposure because of the owned media that you've put out there, viral share and pickup, reach of the messaging from your owned media and or your earned media, just media hits, exposure, reach, eyeballs, likes and shares and comments certainly I think come in there too. But ultimately the way you measure thought leadership is, in the future, as a result of this, how many more people are referring back to you on a regular basis as being, this person or this company knows a little something about this. So you're going to measure that in what I would call soft metrics. They're not dollars and cents, hard metrics.
What would those
soft
metrics look like?
So those metrics, the soft metrics would look like, okay, we published this particular piece to take a stand on this issue. We had website traffic. We had likes and comments and shares, retweets and whatnot on social networks. We were quoted in 17 different publications online and 3 publications offline. The total reach, the total eyeballs that our media services estimate for those publications was 1.5 million people, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all soft metrics, and I only call them soft because they're not putting dollars in your hands or in your pockets. If your goal with a piece of content is to drive sales, then obviously you're going to measure how many people click, how many people convert, how many people add to cart, how many people abandon cart, how many people complete the transaction, and then if you have the ability to, how many times does that customer come back, what's the lifetime value of that customer, et cetera, et cetera. So it's
Right.
all whatever the goal is for that piece of content. That's what you measure to, and I think that's where most digital marketers, or more broadly speaking, marketers get sidetracked. Is they say, okay, we're going to do a branding exercise, and then they try to measure it by how much did we sell. Well,
Mhm.
branding is not about selling. Branding is about laying the foundation for selling, but you measure it very differently.
And what's the timeline that people would expect those metrics to come back? Let's say we're talking about thought leadership specifically. What uh, what's the timeline that those are going to come back on? People are like, oh, I'm going to be, internet famous in a week or a month or a year. I mean, you've
Well,
been doing this for a long time.
sure,
Uh,
sure. I think to answer that question, there's going to be short-term metrics and long-term metrics. So your short-term metrics are going to be, hey, we published it on Monday, so look at it on Friday. How much traffic did we get? How many click-throughs did we get? How many conversions did we get? Whatever, so on and so forth. But I think from a thought leadership perspective, your goal is to build thought leadership. It's not to turn a switch and make a thought leader. Right? It's to build thought leadership over time. So what you do is you benchmark and trend and measure over time and say, hey, you know what? In January, we got this many eyeballs, we got this many, independent third-party quotes and coverage. In February, it went up. In March, it went up further. By
mhm.
June, it was up here, right? So you're trending things over time so that you have a benchmark to look back and say, when we started this thought leadership piece, we had 100 followers. We had 2 comments on every post, and we didn't get any quotes on any media. And after a year, we've got 10,000 followers. We're getting 100 comments on every post, and we're quoted in 3 media outlets a month. Right?
Mhm.
That's success. Right?
Well, let's talk about weighing that success, because so many people, they're so focused on the followers. I was in a meeting yesterday and they were like, we've got to have 100,000 followers by the end of the month. And I'm like, okay, A, it's not going to happen unless you pay for it, and then it's stupid. And B, why do you care? And it's always an issue. I mean, there are people who have hundreds of thousands of followers, obviously, that are legitimate, but they earned them over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you value the quality of followers on any network, not specific
Sure.
to?
So I think the easiest way to do that is by measuring some form of conversion rate. So yeah, I can go out and start a new Twitter account tomorrow or a new Facebook account tomorrow, and I can go out and throw some dollars at it, and I can get, let's say, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 followers, friends, whatever, in a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
Um, or I can compare it to, I'll use my own personal Twitter account just because I generally know the metrics. I think I've got 80,000 followers on Twitter that I've built over time. I've never paid for a single follower. It's always been organic and sharing, and hey, you should follow Jason Falls because he shares good content or whatever. So I've got 80,000, right? If I posted a link that said, hey, everybody, I really believe in this product. I think you should buy this. Then there's going to be a conversion rate of how many people that click from that link to whatever landing page it is. And then there's going to be, or actually I call that an action rate, because conversion I like to think of as money. So that's an action rate. Somebody clicked, they took an action. And then the conversion rate, how many people, once they click, actually purchase. So I've got 2 metrics to look at. Let's say I get 5% action rate and I get a 0.5% conversion rate. So now I've got something. Then I'm going to go over here and look at the audience that I manufactured, that I paid for. And let's say I get 100,000 followers, so I've got more followers. I promise you my action rate is going to be lower, and I promise you my conversion rate is going to be lower,
Sure.
because those are not quality followers. Those are not people who organically, hey, I'm going to intentionally follow this person for a reason. It's just people who clicked on links.
Mhm.
Now, here's the thing, though. We as marketers, especially in the social media organic, we want to do this right, and we don't want to be spammers and whatnot. We have a tendency to think that going out and buying followers is wrong. It is in a lot of cases, but it's not always wrong, because sometimes if you're trying to sell yourself to an audience as being a thought leader, and you have 100 followers on Twitter, but you can go out and pay for 50,000 overnight, you're going to look a hell of a lot smarter to people who don't know any better. Right? And so, yeah, it's a little smoke and mirrors. Yeah, it's a little disingenuous. But at the same time, there are instances where astroturfing followers isn't necessarily a bad idea, depending upon what your goals are. I generally wouldn't endorse it. I generally wouldn't recommend it because it's not going to be as effective. It's not going to be as efficient. But sometimes you're given, hey, I got a 3-month window to do this. We got to pull strings. We got to pull triggers. Also, too, if your product or service is a broad general consumer to the public product or service, I think there are a percentage of those followers that you would buy that are going to be bots and fake, and they're not actually going to be real people. But some of them are going to be real people. So the more people you get, the more action rate you're going to get, the more clicks you're going to get. So sometimes bigger is better, and volume does count. You have to carefully think those things through, though, because the more you astroturf the number you have, the lower your conversion and your action rates are going to go down. So you have to understand what your tolerance level is there.
Yeah, how effective are you going to be, right? But, I think if you look at it that way, yeah, you can buy followers, and a lot of them will be from the Ukraine or porn queens. But you can also say, I'm going to promote tweets on Twitter, which can be a very effective way to target your market. I find promoting profiles is just hella expensive. I think it runs about $1.30 a follower. So, that's a really expensive way to do it. But I think promoting tweets actually gets what you're saying in front of the target market that you want to without compromising the quality of the followers. It depends on what your goals are, like you said. I mean, if your goals are to go after gamers, then, hey, go buy the followers because half of them are gamers. That's why they're doing it.
Well, and I think that's also an area where you can look at what Facebook offers in terms of paid promotions, paid sponsored posts and whatnot, and what Twitter and Pinterest and other networks offer. Facebook is far more advanced in how they do it now, because if you want to build your audience on Facebook, you can actually do your little right side ad, which is fine and surprisingly is somewhat effective. But you can also just have a really good post of really good content. Throw $20 a day behind it for a couple of days, and you're going to see your follower count go up because you're reaching, if you target your audience well, you're reaching a more relevant audience with that post.
Yeah, and it's all about relevance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do you think about, Steve wants to know, what do you think about newsjacking and how important that is to content marketing?
So, it's funny, we do a bit of newsjacking at Cafe Press, and for those of you who don't know Cafe Press, we're a print-on-demand company, so you bring a photo or an image, a design, and you put it on products at Cafe Press. We are the engine that prints it on the product. And so, for instance, we had a designer, and we're like YouTube. We have a user-generated content website where designers from around the world upload images, and we just put them on product for them, and then we aggregate those in a marketplace. We had a designer the other day after the soccer match where the one player bit the Argentinian player. And Suarez or whatever his name was took a chunk out of this guy's shoulder, and so we had a designer who uploaded a really cool sort of Argentine soccer ball with the Argentinian flag behind it or something, and it said 3 bites and you're out or something like that. Which was kind of funny because this guy had apparently bitten 2 or 3 people before in other soccer matches, so he's known for doing that. So that was a really timely design that was related to a news item that we could throw up and say, hey, this is relevant if people are thinking about that, or we target it to Argentinian soccer fans or whatever at the time. We can probably sell a few of those. And it actually worked. We were able to put that out there, and it's still out there actually because it's still fresh. We do that quite a bit. We do a little bit of content marketing around that. I think we posted the top 10 shirts that Alec Baldwin wouldn't be caught dead in when he was arrested for driving the wrong way on a bicycle in New York City, which I still don't understand how that's possible. But anyway, he got arrested for that. So we do a bit of newsjacking. Here's what I would say about newsjacking, though. More often than not, it needs to be incredibly relevant to your brand and incredibly clever, or you get negative feedback from it. People will say, oh, you're just trying to interrupt my news with this semi-related blah, 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 right?
Right.
We get away with it a lot at Cafe Press because a lot of the designs that people upload to Cafe Press are funny, or they're humorous, tongue-in-cheek kind of things. And so we're sort of giving social commentary with a design while subtly saying, oh, and if you want it on a shirt, you can click this link, right? Or if you want it on a coffee mug, you can click this link. So we sort of get away with it in a really fun way because we're throwing up social commentary, and oh, by the way, you can put it on product. We're a unique, animal in that regard. But I would be very careful if you want to use newsjacking for your brand, because too often, if you're not clever and there's not a really highly relevant reason for you to say, hey, see this news item? Well, if you did this with our product, this wouldn't happen to you, or whatever. If you can't make that almost immediate connection, you're getting a lot of people pushing back on you and saying, come on, that was cheap, that was unfair. And certainly if it's a negative news event like a school shooting or a tragic death or something like that, just stay the hell away. Just don't even on holidays like Memorial Day and whatnot that are sort of about this solemn sort of thing. The last couple of, like on Father's Day, for instance, Cafe Press's Facebook page, instead of posting more Father's Day designs, which we'd been doing for a couple of weeks, I posted no design, no call to action. I just said, hey, we just want to thank all the dads out there for all they've done for us, or something like that. It was just a sweet sentiment. We weren't trying to sell anything. Just happy Father's Day from Cafe Press. We'll see you on Monday, right? And I thought that was really the only appropriate way we could celebrate Father's Day on that Sunday. Leading up to it, hey, buy stuff for your dad. Yeah, that's what we're all about. But on that day, it was like, you know what? Let's just say Happy Father's Day and be done with it.
Well, I think we've seen an influx of what now we're calling Oreo moments, right? Everybody's trying to find that perfect jump on it, we can solve this, we're going to be famous sort of thing. And it doesn't happen because that was an amazing catch. It was a really good grab. But those things are really hard to come up with, and your creative team has to be so on it.
Yeah, and what's really funny, if you think back, if I'm not mistaken, and I think this is right, I think the 1984 Macintosh commercial for the Super Bowl that was directed by Ridley Scott was one of the first, if not the first, like 30 to 60 second television commercial that was directed by a Hollywood director and had a script and was treated like a movie production. And shortly after that, you had like Michael Jackson's Thriller was directed by John Landis, and you had all these, the movie industry was sort of invading the commercial and television space. And it's the same kind of thing. Apple did it the way it should be done. They had this one aha, brilliant creative moment with Ridley Scott. They had the 1984 Macintosh commercial, and then everybody else tried to replicate that success. Well, that's kind of what you're seeing with the Old Spices and the Oreos and whatnot. Now everybody in the social media, digital marketing space is like, ooh, how do we do that? Well, it's kind of fallen on deaf ears because you're like, well, unless you can have that really unique emotional connection with the audience that just makes them say, forget about the brand, forget about what you're trying to do, and totally locking into the message that you're trying to send, that's when it works. And that's rare. It really is rare.
Yeah, way rarer than people like to think about that. I think we're going to go ahead and close with that because that seems like a really good segue. I really want to thank you for being on the show. Steve is screaming no, 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 and he doesn't want you to go because he's been picking on me for half an hour. But that's not news to anybody who watches the show.
He says he likes not being on camera.
He does. That's because he can pick on me and nobody knows. And he doesn't have to think at the same time.
Well, and no offense, Steve, but it's a great benefit to the viewer as well.
That's mean. Jason, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Sure. I am typically at the bar. No, I am at Jason Falls on Twitter. And I still write every Monday typically on socialmediaexplorer.com. And I also have kind of a site where you can connect with me on a bunch of different channels at jasonfalls.com.
Which reminds me, our PSA for the day is don't text and drive.
Yes, out of reach. I use the hashtag out of reach. to remind people when you're in your car, you are out of reach, and you need to put your phone out of reach, because if you do that, then we're all going to be safer.
That's really great advice. That's great advice, especially here in the Bay Area where everybody is driving and talking on their phone.
That's true.
In 6 lanes of traffic. So, okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. If you want to watch the show replay because it was just fabulous, you can watch it on Google. You can watch it on thefridayhangout.com. You can listen to it on iTunes, on Spreaker, and on iHeartRadio. And we hope you'll come back next week at, 11 o'clock-ish. We're never quite on time. Thanks, everybody. Thanks a lot, Jason. It was great. Thank you, Steve. It was kind of fun having you be mute.
Thank you, too.
Bye, everybody.